Trump has handled the relationship with India poorly, and he's handled most of our relationships with allies very poorly. It's a 25% increase on so many essential goods that we buy from India. India is a strategic partner in so many ways with the United States. I mean, military cooperation to undermine our relationships with allies like India, I think is really bad for our country and for the American people. The president is trying to strong arm India in different foreign policy ways, but to me, the foreign policy should be separated from essentially taxing the American people.
So there's nothing more interesting than covering US politics. Right now, you have Donald Trump, of course, as president of the United States, signing in pieces of legislation and enacting policies that are having ripple effects across the globe, including the 25% tariff that was announced on India just today. You also have the Democratic Party sitting in opposition right now, pushing back against Donald Trump's agenda. Joining us now is a member of Congress from the 10th District of Virginia, Suhas Subramanyam, the latest addition to the Samosa Caucus, as it were. Of course, Representative Subramanyam, welcome to Hindustan Times. Could I ask you to begin by telling us a little bit about yourself? You were just elected to Congress in 2024. This is your first term. And of course, you are right in the thick of it with the battles between your party and the Trump administration. How exactly is that going for you as a first-term congressman?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I came into this not expecting this much of an attack by this administration on both the federal civil service, which I represent many of those federal civil servants, as well as the increasing costs on Americans. Tariffs are a tax on the American people. And so when you put a tariff on goods, then it's not necessarily the country that's going to suffer or the businesses. What they're going to try to do instead is they're going to pass those costs along to the American customers and the American people. So yes, that will hurt trade relationships with countries like India. In this case, a 25% tariff means a 25% increase on so many essential goods that we buy from India. And that's going to be bad for everyone, but especially the American people. I see this as a tax, basically. And all of this seems to be happening because the president is trying to strong arm India in different foreign policy ways. But to me, the foreign policy should be separated from essentially taxing the American people.
Could I get a sense from you about how you're seeing the Trump administration more generally, what your key priorities are? Because there was a sense, that the Democratic Party seems to be a little scattered at this point in time, not able to figure out what its direction is, after the defeat in 2024. You've, of course, got a very important election coming up next year. You're, of course, also going to be up for re-election. Could you tell us a little bit about how the Democratic Party is approaching the challenge from President Trump?
Sure. What makes it difficult is Trump's party, the Republican Party, has control of the U.S. Congress, the U.S. Senate, as well as the Supreme Court, essentially. And the Supreme Court has become very political. And so he has complete control of government right now. And it's difficult to have the votes to undermine anything. And I've seen a lot of, to their credit, unity on the Republican side when it comes to blindly following Trump and doing what he says. So that makes it difficult. What I found effective, though, is when we speak out about bad policies and we get people to share their stories. There seems to be backtracking by this administration in many instances. And so, whether it's tariffs and businesses speaking out about how it's hurting them, or people speaking out about how it hurts them at the grocery store or in the gas lines, whatever it is, I see the American people needing to be a part of this conversation. And certainly, the Democratic Party is doing what it can to fight back, but we don't have one specific leader right now because we don't have the White House. But we all have to be leaders ourselves. And so I'm not waiting around for leadership. I'm going to try to lead and try to make sure that my constituents have a voice.
Could you tell us, you of course, a Indian American representative. You've made clear in the past that your relationship to India matters to you as well. Could you tell us a little bit about how you see the Trump administration's handling of the relationship with India? There's a lot of jitters right now in New Delhi about, just one thing after the other. The problems that we had with Pakistan, President Trump claiming that he helped broker the ceasefire between the two countries. India has, of course, opposed that. In fact, that was a big feature of Parliament and the discussions yesterday. We've seen these tariffs as well. How would you say that Trump has handled the relationship with India?
Yeah, I think Trump has handled the relationship with India poorly, and he's handled most of our relationships with allies very poorly. I think Trump has been the most sort of forgiving of Vladimir Putin and has tried to improve that relationship. But other than that relationship, he's hurt our relationships with pretty much every other country besides Russia, which is a little bit backwards from what I would hope for from a president at this time. And so, I see that. And it's not just about, certainly my family is from India. My mom's from Bangalore. My dad's from Chennai and Secunderabad. And I have ties in India. I still have family in India. But India is a strategic partner in so many ways with the United States. I mean, military cooperation should continue and increase economic cooperation. We're natural allies in many other ways, two big democracies. And then there's concerns in our country about China trying to expand its influence and reach in Asia, and so India is a natural ally. And so to undermine and attack India and to undermine our relationships with allies like India, I think is really bad for our country and for the American people.
Right. Could I get a sense of, what your priorities are personally? You're a first-term congressman. Your sense of what you're fighting for, because of course, as you were pointing out, you represent a number of federal workers. We've all seen, even sitting here in India, the impact that DOGE has had on the American government. What are your top priorities? If you give us three in terms of what you're personally pursuing as a member of Congress right now with regards to the Trump administration.
Yeah. Just taking a step back, I think the reason why the United States has become, one of the most, if not the most powerful country and powerful economy in the world is because one, we have a strong democracy and the rule of law is very important, and we have a court system that upholds that rule of law. And second, we have a capitalist society that also looks at trying to help the weakest and poor and those in need. And so everyone has a chance at this American dream, right? And third, I look at, everything in our country and we've done poor foreign policy. We've made mistakes over the years, but overall, we've shown a lot of strength and upheld democracy around the world. And so all that is being undermined right now. And part of that, when it comes to our economy, is also we've invested in basic research, we've invested in science and technology, and we've become a leader in so many different fields and spaces. And so now you look at what's happening now. This is an administration that's undermining the rule of law and undermining our democracy. They're cutting funding for basic research. They're firing many of the scientists and civil servants who have helped uphold the law and make our country great. And they're ruining a lot of our diplomacy that we built up over many decades. And so I see that as my priorities, essentially, is trying to get back to what made our country so great and so powerful was the fact that we did all these things. And our adversaries are celebrating the Trump administration and how weak he is making our country. And our allies are bewildered. Allies like India, allies like Ukraine, allies like our European counterparts. And so we have to continue to push for what made us great and not undermine those things like this administration has done.
Right. Could you tell us a little bit about how you plan to do that exactly? The Democratic Party, as you mentioned, is in the opposition in various in the various chambers in Congress, and of course does not hold the White House. What can you do personally to sort of hold the government to account on these issues, sort of restrain some of the effects it seems to be having on American diplomacy?
Yeah, the only way we can sort of push back is to be very loud, be very creative about how we fight, and not allow things to just happen and wave a white flag. And so, example, we had federal workers who were fired at different agencies. We made a big stink about it, and we had articles in the paper. I spoke up on the House floor many times. We were able to make some change. We were able to help, get the administration to backtrack, admit mistakes. And if we had stayed quiet, then nothing would have happened. No change would have happened. And so we have to continue to be loud and to be forceful and not be afraid in this moment. And I see some institutions and some people who are afraid, and they don't think, they think if they capitulate, that is our best course of action. But I'll tell you, the best thing for our country is not to capitulate. And certainly long term, our allies like India want to see us continue to be a strong country, continue to improve trade, not undermine trade, and continue military and economic cooperation.
Right. Could I ask you to give us a sense? A lot of people are going to be watching this, have been watching the what we've been seeing coming out of America. With the Elon Musk, the Doge firings, now the Epstein files. It just seems that every day there seems to be a bunch of news that seems to convey some dysfunction. I remember when you were running for Congress and I happened to interview you, I asked you how you felt about polarization in America, what it meant for you as a candidate, and now a congressman to be running in such a difficult time in America's domestic politics. How do you personally navigate that? Like, a lot of people are going to be looking at these headlines and saying America is just a very chaotic, dysfunctional place right now. What message would you send to people who are looking at just the headlines coming out of America and saying, what's the story there? What would you say, perhaps even to reassure them if there is something to be reassured about?
Yeah, I'm biased, but I think America is still the greatest country in the world. We still have a very strong economy. It's being undermined by this administration, but we still have one, and we'll still continue to be a reliable partner. It's just, this administration's undermined a lot of those things, but we still have, strong voices in our country that will continue to push back when this administration does things undermine our democracy or undermine our relationships around the world. But certainly, I think long term, I want to see all of these tariffs lowered or eliminated. I think that's what's best for the American people. I want to see us actually encourage and increase our economic gains, and that involves actually striking new trade deals that will allow for more economic cooperation long term. And so I think we're going in the opposite direction of what I'd like to see. And certainly, we have domestic issues like the cutting of Medicaid and other healthcare issues that I think again go the opposite direction. We need to cover more people. So there's a lot that we're concerned about, but I'm still optimistic about our country long term.
Right. Could I ask you one more question? You were one of the first, if not, I believe the first to be like Indian American, South Asian to be elected to the House of Delegates in Virginia. You were, of course, then elected to the United States House of Representatives. And therefore, you have a strong understanding of the South Asian community, the Indian American community, in the United States. And there was a sense that in the 2024 election, they moved somewhat strongly towards supporting President Trump. I was speaking to another congressman recently, and he says that, around 70% of the Indian Americans he knows are strongly aligned towards President Trump. Do you still think that's the case? Is this wearing off? What are you seeing in terms of the Indian American community and the South Asian community's view of President Trump?
Yeah, I think overall, yes, there's been a shift towards Trump in the past couple of years. But I think the majority of Indian Americans still are Democrats and support Democrats. I think many of them consider themselves independent, but then align with Democrats because they believe in a lot of the Democratic values of making sure we have a strong economy that works for everyone, making sure everyone has health care, making sure we have a sensible foreign policy. And so, a lot of the values of the Democratic Party align with Indian Americans. But I have seen a shift. I think it's really easy to attack whoever's in power and be mad at them and blame them for everything that's going on. And so I think you saw a shift from a lot of different ethnic groups towards Trump. In fact, I think the only group that shifted away from Trump really was probably college educated voters generally. But with that said, I think putting tariffs on India will not help his standing with Indian Americans. I think putting the our democracy at risk at times will not help with him. Intervention, like for instance, meeting with the military leader of Pakistan will probably not help him with Indian or Pakistani American voters here. And so, I think there's a lot of things President Trump is doing without realizing that he's undermining the very people that move towards him.
Understood. Suhas Subramanyam, representative from the 10th Congressional District of Virginia, thank you so much for joining us, and best of luck as you head on in your freshman term in Congress, and as you, of course, continue your political fight with President Trump. Thank you so much for joining us here on HT and explaining your view and the Democratic Party's view of the challenge posed by President Trump.
Thank you.